Alright, time for a little chat about the Wool Game of Wool, the competition show hosted by Tom Daly. It's kind of going off of the Great British, I cannot speak, the Great British Bake Off. There was a sewing competition, I think some others. But the baking one being, I think, the one most people know, and maybe it was the first, I don't know. I've honestly only kind of watched either or on YouTube for a bit. I've not been a consistent watcher, but they are just cozy watches that, while being a competition, it's just kind of a lot of people having a good time in such a British way. So we finally have a knitting competition, so a fiber arts knitting show, which I'll be upfront and say overall, this is kind of my review slash thoughts on the first episode. I got to finally watch it last night. I cozied up and just honestly had a good time. So I'm just going to preface that I'm just happy to have some kind of fiber arts show slash media that is positive and that is just exploring it through some kind of medium like that. Now I say positive because we have had the whole Hank Green video lately, which I don't think was quite positive. It was kind of hurtful and it had a lot of misinformation. So not like that. And while there probably are definitely some cons to this type of format for a show, I don't think it's nearly as harmful in the way they've been presenting it. The people participating in it, I think it's quite a different thing. So, and just to tell you, I'm working on this is a character cardigan. This is the body I have here. I'm working on the two sleeves here on my circular needles, and I'll just be working on that through this video. I have a full video coming out about that process, or you can see the updates on my Instagram and TikTok if interested. Now, to my review and thoughts. So like I said, I was just kind of happy that we're having any kind of positive show of this sort, but I was really curious, what were they going to do for this knitting to make it, because I assumed this wasn't simply for knitters, that this wasn't going to be for highly technical swatches or things like that, or something knitters would be really invested to see and would understand. And while they of course explain the techniques, a lot of people don't just need enough to understand and watch. So similar with the Great British Bake Off, I am not a prolific baker. I know very basics, very basics. And part of that is a lot of people are novices and you kind of just see what they're doing, but you don't need to know how to bake to watch it. And so I figured this was going to be a similar thing, that this was going to need to appeal to non-knitters as well. So I was like, well, knitting is a very slow craft. It is like, what else? Like weaving, or if you were to do the process of basket weaving from the start, when you have to gather the materials, dry them out, and process them, it's not something very easily put into a competition. And of course, there's been the talk a lot on social media about fast knitters and problems people have had with that. I don't care if you're a fast knitter. I think that's great. And for those of you who feel pressured by fast knitters who happen to do it fast, or yes, maybe are doing it a bit for social media, they can be fast and you don't need to be. I'm just going to put that there. It's okay. It's okay. Everyone's, and we all just, let's acknowledge that in general, knitting is definitely a slow craft. So just to kind of, for a lot of those reasons, I was wondering, what are they going to do to make this very appealing? Because when people, non-knitters, think of knitting, or even knitters, you think, okay, sweaters and socks mostly, maybe scarves and hats, right? And so I was like, well, they can't do a bunch of just like gloves and hats, can they? I mean, they could, but let's see what they're going to do. I imagine they wanted to do some garments or some grand full pieces that would be very big and visual, instead of little, stitches that non-knitters wouldn't be as invested in. And it's like, oh, the color work or the cabling on that. So what they did was, spoilers, They are working with chunky yarn, so, and they were tasked to make a garment with chunky yarn. Both tasks were actually done with chunky yarn, with big, massive needles, which neither of which I have ever used. I've always done medium to lower weight. I think most of us have. Chunky yarn just isn't something many of us gravitate to unless you're kind of doing like a blanket or something. But exceptions. I've seen this guy who does these big, massive coats in chunky yarn, and it seems very suitable to his climate. He shows him in full pouring snow, and they're very kind of masculine, so I imagine the weight, he's a big guy, so I don't think the weight is as much a problem as it would be for me, for my body and in my climate here. So there are definitely exceptions, but in general, a lot of knitting is done with smaller yarn. And their first task was Fair Isle, which is also often done with finer yarn. And so, but I will say, I thought it was fun. I was actually surprised at how much detail they were able to make into their Fair Isle designs. They made little vests, like tank tops, instead of sweaters. And I actually was pleased with kind of the results of it. Again, it's not highly technical. It is kind of a rush job, something most people wouldn't wear. It really is something a little out there. The chunkiness isn't something most people would be comfortable wearing. It's bulky, it's a little awkward. But for a competition piece and for something probably to display that you were on this show and to do that, I think it's fine. And it was something very big and visual for people who aren't knitters to see and get an idea. You can also then see the stitches more clearly. So I think that was all well enough. This isn't a show just for us knitters who would like to see a lot of technicalities. No. And the second part was a collaborative project where they had to design a sofa cover, knit it, and then, kind of put it all together. And so that was a little odd since knitting isn't usually a group activity, unlike maybe if you did sewing, like if you were to do a quilt or things of that sort. That's often collaborative, but knitting generally isn't. So what they did was they each individually knit parts and then they started sewing them up together. But in general, I think that was fun. It felt a little childish, but it's a competition show and it was just fun and lighthearted, and it was kind of interesting to see their takes on it. I actually personally really did enjoy just watching that. It was fun. But something unrealistic. Again, they're doing things that aren't very knitter-like. Like they kind of gave you this odd project for Fair Isle, so this very traditional type, a way of making garments, and the one contestant who went very traditional with it, with adding steeking, which is when you can cut the yarn through a certain method that they do, but it didn't work well with the chunky yarn, so that was kind of working against him in that aspect. So that is the format for the kind of first show. I'm trying not to give too much away, but that was the format, the chunky yarn being a big key player. And I think that is well enough. I think it is providing the good visualness and helps you actually finish something in that short time frame that they have. Otherwise, they wouldn't kind of get anywhere. They would just have a little swatch of a piece, and it just wouldn't make great television. And there are plenty of people who don't think this should be televised, this shouldn't be made a competition, but it's like, and you don't have to, you don't. But some of us like something that adds a little challenge to it, and you saw several of these people. A lot of them aren't very advanced knitters even, or they've kind of been doing, or they have their preferred methods. One wasn't much of a garment maker, so she hasn't made many garments, so that was actually kind of going against her in the I'm trying to say it, keep about to say cardigan, not cardigan, the vest section, because she had to do kind of measurements and figure it out, and it went against her a bit. And so I find that all interesting, and they of course signed up and are willing to do this under this constraint. It's just kind of to join and see, it's kind of a little, maybe a little similar to when you do knit-alongs. There is a deadline, there is some kind of time crunch, and you're kind of trying to do it. And some people enjoy doing that. Not all of us have to, and you're not required to. So that's just kind of out there. I'm a little overly, I feel like I need to pacify a lot because I've seen so many people complain about this. And I don't want to invalidate those thoughts. But I think, personally, I think the show as they have done it is fine. Not the greatest, but it's fine and it's okay, you know? And again, I just enjoyed it. And so obviously some of the cons with this format, the chunky yarn and everything, it's like they're kind of doing things that aren't really giving a good representation of knitting as far as like the techniques can't be quite well done in this. This is a little bit like, it's interesting because you have to kind of do problem solving with your knitted skills. Like say, I compared it in my mind a little bit to if, you know, there was a plane wreck and you're on an island and then you happen to have a knitting skills and there's certain things maybe you could problem solve due to your knitting skills. Could you start, you would know how to maybe get rope material to make some kind of fabric of a sort, but it would have to be not the way you're used to doing it. Something like that. It's problem solving via knitting. It's not really showcasing proper knitting, if that's okay to say. And the one thing I worried about was because it is in a time crunch and because they show that they can, with very, very chunky yarn, make a full vest in a couple hours, we already have a lot of people asking us for knitted garments. This has been taking off and on, grant you, but it's been taking me hours and hours. This is the finest yarn I've worked with thus far, with the finest needles. These are 2mm needles. This is the smallest I've ever worked, and it's been taking me months to work on this piece. And certainly just hours and hours of work has been put into this. And so I can't just like, if a friend asks me, I was like, what you're asking me is to put hours and hours of high skilled labor, or at least skilled labor, so very high value garment, and then just kind of give it to you, which some people do and some people can. I have made garments for my family because I want to, and I was able to set aside the time. They know there is a value to it, and I felt the work was valued. But when it's undervalued, it's harder to want to give something or people feel entitled to demand it because like, oh, it should be quick. I see all these like Reddit stories, you know, I enjoy watching that in crochet and knit drama. And people have these unrealistic expectations that, oh, well, just make me something. And make me something like a cardigan or a wedding dress, if you can believe it. And it's like, that is hours and hours of high skilled labor. So you're asking for thousands of dollars essentially to be handed to you in a product. But it's valued less. We can talk a lot about that because it is now kind of this domestic crafty hobby instead of it being craft as in craftsmanship, instead of something very valued. And machines can knit now, so but it's like, okay, but then design it and get it through a manufacturer that would cost you less than making me do it. So knitters have been up against that, and crocheters as well, for a while now, and seeing them provide that is just giving, I think, a will mislead some people who maybe already have that mindset or take on that mindset that knitting can be done quite quickly and can feel entitled to a knitter's work. So that did concern me a little bit. So I just kind of wanted to note there. I think that's the biggest con for me personally. But so that's kind of on the technical and controversial maybe areas of it. But just some side notes. The contestants are all lovely, as you'd kind of expect from these British competition shows. They're all just lovely characters. Some of them are just like so darling. I did expect them to have a little more out there characters. I thought they were going to kind of showcase a bit of the range of knitters, and they do to a degree. And maybe again, it's because they're just so British that it's not as crazy as probably if America did this, that they'd really want exaggerated characters. Because we do have men knitters, which isn't that big a deal to me, but to some people, and we saw this one gentleman who did say he gets discriminated against, and he has avoided knitting publicly for quite a while because older ladies will make comments about it not being manly. There's this young boy there. I say a boy because I'm not quite sure his age, but like late teens, early 20s. He's a delight. I loved him. He responded that if people have a problem with that, I'm a bloke who knits. I love that phrase. I have bigger things to worry about. And he feels very free and comfortable in his work, and he enjoys color work in particular. I really enjoyed his thoughts and ideas with the craft. So that was all great. I personally, I just love seeing when men are in the fiber arts. It's such a lovely thing to see our brothers doing the craft, as many of them have throughout the years. It just, again, it's become a very feminized craft at this point. So it's fun seeing them doing it, seeing their takes. The one that I thought was maybe the one that was the more out there wasn't one of the male knitters, and he was like in the military. And so you have this guy who is quite the manly archetype, as you might say, but likes to knit. And so I was like, okay, that's giving some idea that there's quite a range. But we had a bit of different people of different ethnicities who liked representing their culture and their work. That was cool to see. We had moms. We had one of the ladies seems to have either an injury or a disablement. It wasn't touched upon much, but she has this cane. But I did wonder, I was expecting something a little more out there. But that being said, they are all so lovely. Like when they were broken off into teams and one finished first, they immediately went over and helped the other one try to quickly finish as time was running out. That was so sweet to see. And I just loved each and every one of them. They were all a delight and just made me feel like I was knitting in there with them. And those are kind of my thoughts. Other thought was on the two judges. So Tom Daly is the host, and he's probably, again, the most out there one present because he was wearing this very elaborate knit. It's kind of like a poncho / dress sort of thing. Very fun, but it was like it was fun that he had the most crazy piece. Everyone was wearing, not everyone, but a lot of people were wearing their sweaters or something. The judges had sweaters on. One lady had, I noted, a crochet cardigan on, and she's the one who says she doesn't tend to knit wearables. So I was like, gotcha. Yeah, that might make sense. And I don't know if she'd made it or someone else, but I was like, I initially was like, oh, that's crochet. And I was like, oh, and she's not a garment maker. Yeah, crochet. If she were to make garments, maybe she'd prefer crochet because it's quicker. But all that being said, the two judges are these two older ladies who've done a lot of work in the knitting world. I'm sorry, I wasn't aware of them beforehand, but I admire their work and their expertise. And I will say they just kind of, one lady likes to highlight the creative choices, while the other one looks over kind of some of the technicalities, and she's usually less, she just either kind of says, well done, or it's like, well, it's not finished, is it? Or something of that sort. And so I can see how she's a bit of a downer to some people. But both of them together, I felt like I didn't get much from their feedback other than, oh, isn't that nice? A few points they did give a little extra when they particularly liked something, but I was expecting a little more from the judges' thoughts. But if that means we get more of the contestants, I think I'm happy with that. But on my final note for all of this, so while this, again, isn't necessarily just for knitters, this is kind of Because knitting has become so popular, it's made its way to be able to be this. And of course, with celebrities, Tom Daley being one, bringing it to the public eye more. I do hope to see this prompt more knitters to make more sort of contests or other types of programs or things for knitters. So it would be very much more technical. And one thought I had was I like to follow the YouTube Artist Collective, and they will do, I forget how often it was, if it was like monthly or more infrequently than that. I actually haven't watched in a bit, but they would have like a theme, and then they would make an art piece surrounding that. And since they were YouTubers, they of course recorded their process, let you know, and it's like, oh, and check who wins. And then there was like a submission thing. I don't know if that exists for knitters, but I would love to see that. I would love to see us get a theme and then have to submit a piece to be judged. I don't know who would judge it, but again, I would love something like that, because then you get a time frame to work on the piece. There could be vlogs done about the piece if we're doing YouTubers or TikTokers or the like, and I think that would create a lot of great investment and something a little more catered to both the technique and the time of knitting that would highlight and respect that aspect of the craft. I would love to know your thoughts. Did you watch it? What were your favorite parts, or what are your problems with it? What are your thoughts for something the knitting community could come up with? I know there are a few things out there that I've started to see, but definitely I want to see more, and maybe something I could participate in. So let me know all your thoughts, and I will probably keep reviewing each episode as it comes out.